Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a look at your leap into the world of coding.
Oh, this is going to be fun.
It seems like you've been working with Microsoft Outlook and Excel, right?
Sounds familiar.
Using VBA to automate some tasks. We've got a couple of sources for today's deep dive, Q504, slides.pdf, and Q504, cockatoo.pdf.
All right.
And I gotta say, it feels like we're going to be looking over the shoulder of another coder, seeing how they do things, you know?
Yeah. Getting to see someone else's coding journey, their decisions, the stuff they struggle with, the breakthroughs they have, it's so valuable.
It is.
You learn not just what they did, but why.
Exactly. So let's jump right in, huh? The Q504 slides.pdf, it mentions using code in MS Outlook.
Oh.
Which I'll admit, that got me curious. It doesn't go into any detail, though.
A little bit of a tease.
Kinda, yeah. But it does make you wonder, what kinds of tasks could you automate in Outlook using VBA?
Something to think about. Might be worth looking into later on.
Yeah, definitely add that to the to-do list. Okay, let's move on to Q504, cockatoo.pdf. This one looks like it's a transcript with timestamps. Probably from a video, though we don't seem to have that. Even without the video, this transcript has a lot of interesting stuff. It's like we're right there with the coder, watching how they think things through.
Yeah, I see that.
So here's where things get really interesting. The code. Looks like the coder's trying to pull data from something called AmiBroker, which sounds like some kind of trading platform. And they're pulling it into an Excel spreadsheet. It seems like they're aiming to automate some calculations and updates using that data.
I can see that. Think about it pulling info straight from your broker into a spreadsheet. Then you can do all sorts of things with it, like analyzing it, visualizing it, even using it to make decisions.
So many possibilities.
It's really powerful.
I can see that, yeah. The coder uses something called for.next loops and while loops a lot. Can you explain what those are for those of us who haven't exactly mastered coding just yet?
Oh, of course. Imagine you've got a task you got to do a bunch of times, like sending an email to everyone on your contact list. Instead of writing the same code over and over for each person, you can use a loop.
Okay.
That were for. Next loop is basically saying, do this thing a set number of times. You tell the code when to start, when to stop, and it runs until it's done.
So it's all about efficiency. You don't have to write a ton of code.
Exactly.
What about while loops?
While loops are a little different. They keep running as long as a certain condition is true. Say you're checking your inbox for a certain email. You could use a while loop to keep checking until that email comes in.
Oh, I see.
It's like saying, keep doing this until something changes.
Okay, that makes sense. The transcript actually mentions that the coder was worried about potential infinite loops in their while loop. There's even a comment. Looks like, which I'm guessing means they were afraid of their computer crashing.
Yeah, that's a common fear, especially when you're just starting out with loops. If that condition that controls the loop never becomes false, the code could just keep running forever. And that could cause, well, problems. The cool thing is we actually see the coder figuring this out in the transcript, learning as they go. They figure out how to set that condition so the loop actually stops eventually.
That's like a real-time coding lesson,
Yeah.
complete with debugging adventures.
Exactly.
Speaking of challenges, there's a part where the coder runs into trouble with extra spaces in their data. It makes their calculations go all wonky.
Then a classic issue of surprise spaces.
Right. It happens all the time when you're working with data from different sources.
So the best of us. But the coder's solution here is really clever. They use something called the trim function. It basically gets rid of any extra spaces at the beginning or end of a piece of text.
So it's like cleaning up the data before you actually use it, making sure those little spaces don't mess things up. Amazing how even the smallest details can make a big difference in coding, right?
Totally. It's amazing how much you can get sucked into code, huh?
It really is. Yeah. What's so cool about this deep dive is we're not just seeing the code.
Yeah.
You know, we're seeing how the coder thinks.
Right.
It's like a window into how they solve problems, how they figure things out.
Totally. And it looks like the coder has a big aha moment here when they realize they got to clean up their Excel spreadsheet. They even use this neat trick recording a macro to see the code Excel uses to delete a range of cells.
Oh, that's clever.
Right.
It's like getting a behind-the-scenes look at how Excel works.
Exactly. By recording that macro, they get the code they need without having to write it themselves. Saves time, avoids errors, and then they just pop that cleaning routine into their main code. Nice and smooth.
It's a great example of using existing tools,
Yeah.
to make your coding more efficient. Shows how much the coder cares about writing good code. It's not just hacking something together. They're building a real solution.
Yeah.
Something that's easy to understand, easy to maintain.
For sure. Speaking of structure, the transcript mentions something called a worksheet interface, or matcher. The coder's starting to set things up for some more complicated interactions between their code, Excel, external data files, and their trading platform. It's like they're building a bridge between these different systems with code as the foundation.
A bridge built with code. That's a pretty powerful image. So far, we've seen them pull data into Excel, clean it up, and now they're setting up a way to connect to their trading platform. What happens next?
Well, next the transcript talks about exploration results and exporting a CSV file.
Okay, I'm not really familiar with those terms. Can you explain?
Of course. Remember, this coder's all about automating their trading. Exploration results probably means the output of some research they've done on potential trades. A CSV file, comma-separated values, it's a super simple way to store data. Basically, a text file, each line is a row of data, and each value in that row is separated by a comma.
So it's like a neat little list of their trading research.
Exactly. And the coder's exporting those results from their trading platform as that CSV file so they can use VBA to get that data into Excel. The transcript goes into how they do this, reading the file line by line, checking if a row has data, and if it does, using a function called split to separate those values based on the commas.
Hold on, can you break down that split function a bit more?
Sure. Imagine you have a sentence like, "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog." If you want to separate each word, you could use that split function with a space as the delimiter. It would give you a list of individual words. The coder's doing the same thing with their CSV file, but using commas to separate the values.
Got it. So it's like taking that line of data and breaking it up into little pieces.
Yeah.
Each piece is a specific value.
You got it. And once they have those individual bits of data, they can put them in the right cells in their spreadsheet. This is like data manipulation 101. And it shows how powerful VBA is for automating these repetitive tasks.
Yeah, that's cool.
Then the transcript mentions something called Open Hire Pro. In terms like HHV, high since buy, trailing stops. Sounds like they're starting to set up a system for managing their trades.
Ooh, okay. This is where it gets really interesting for me. I've always been fascinated by the idea of using code to create trading systems. Can you explain what those terms mean? How are they being used in the code?
You bet. So Open Hire Pro, that seems to be referring to the highest price a stock's hit since the trade was opened, the high watermark. HHV, that's highest high value. It's probably a variable they're using to store that highest price for each position. And high since buy, same idea.
So they're keeping track of the highest point each trade's reached. Okay, I can see why that'd be important for figuring out when to sell. What about those trailing stops?
A trailing stop, that's a way to automatically get out of a trade when the price starts going against you. It's like a safety net, so you don't lose too much. The code probably has some logic to update these trailing stops based on the current price and the highest price the stock's hit. Let's say the stock price hits a new high. That trailing stop might get adjusted up to lock in more profit. If the price drops, the trailing stop might be lowered to limit potential losses.
Wow, that's pretty smart. It's like building a whole trading system. What else does the code do?
Well, they also talk about something called time stop, which makes me think they might have a rule about exiting trades based on how long they've been in them. Like maybe they sell a stock if it hasn't hit a certain profit target within a certain time.
That's a good strategy. Sometimes you just got to cut your losses.
For sure. And the code probably has logic to keep track of when each trade was entered and calculate how many days it's been open. It's all about creating a system that follows rules, takes the emotion out of trading.
It's fascinating. It's like we're looking inside the mind of a quantitative trader, seeing how they use code to approach the market.
It is. And the coder's thinking process is just as valuable as the code itself.
Right?
They're showing us how important planning is, breaking down big problems into smaller steps, thinking through different scenarios.
And speaking of thinking things through, they're really meticulous about testing their code before using it for real trading. They specifically mention using a text file as a test before writing to the actual AmiBroker watch list.
Oh, yeah, that's super important, especially when you're dealing with something like trading where things can get real expensive real fast. A simple text file lets you make sure the code's working right without risking any real money. It's like a practice run before the main event.
It sounds like this coder really values accuracy. And managing risk, those are good qualities to have, not just in coding, but in life. I'm excited to see what other insights we find in the last part of this transcript. And we're back for the last part of our deep dive into this code. It's amazing how much we've learned just by, watching how someone else does it.
It is, right.
Yeah.
Their struggles, their breakthroughs.
Yeah.
It's like having a mentor guiding us, showing us how to use VBA for stuff like automating trading.
Speaking of real-world applications, the transcript now moves on to a new thing. It's writing specific values, like equity and cash equity, to text files.
Right.
If I remember correctly, this is about how the coder interacts with their trading platform.
Yeah, you got it. It seems like they're using those text files to communicate with their platform. It's like sending coded messages. The platform might not be able to see the data in the spreadsheet directly.
Right.
So these text files act as a go-between.
Right, that makes sense. But why bother with separate files just for that? Wouldn't it be easier to just, copy and paste the values?
You might think so, but there's a reason they're doing it this way. They made a separate utility module just for this. Shows you how much they care about clean code, organized code.
Yeah.
It's like having a specialized toolbox. Every tool has its place.
So by creating this module, they can reuse that code for other text files in the future. Makes things more efficient.
Exactly. Working smarter, not harder. And the transcript shows how they do it. They use those familiar commands, open, print, and close, to handle the files. First, they say where the file is, then they open it for output, write those values, and close it up. Nice and clean.
It's like a little dance between the code and the file system.
I like that, yeah. And they even add some error handling, make sure those files are always closed properly, even if something unexpected happens.
That's right.
Prevents data corruption and stuff.
So they're not just making code that works, they're making it robust, reliable, thinking ahead.
Right.
Good lesson for any coder. Now, the transcript mentions something about writing to an AmiBroker watch list, which I got to say, that sounds pretty cool. Can you explain what that means here?
Sure. In trading, a watch list is basically a list of stocks that a trader wants to keep an eye on. They're looking for potential trading opportunities. They watch the prices, look for patterns, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Seems like our coders using VBA to automatically update their watch list with the stocks they're interested in.
So instead of adding and removing stocks from the watch list manually, that would be a pain.
It would be.
They've automated it with code.
Nice. But how does the code know how to work with AmiBroker?
The transcript talks about using a .tls file extension. That's probably how AmiBroker's watch lists are formatted. It's like a secret handshake. It tells AmiBroker how to read the data. The coder clearly knows their stuff, both with VBA and AmiBroker, making sure the data is written just right.
It's really amazing how they can take all these different things, VBA, text files, trading platforms, and tie them all together. It shows the power of code, how it can bridge the gap between different systems and automate complex tasks.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the main things our listener can take away from this coder's journey?
Well, first of all, it shows how important it is to think clearly and logically when you're coding.
Yeah.
The coder breaks those complex tasks down into smaller steps. It's a very systematic way of solving problems.
Like building a house brick by brick.
Exactly. They also show us how important it is to be organized, to create modules for specific tasks. That makes the code easier to read, easier to maintain, and you can reuse it. And of course, testing.
Right.
The coder keeps saying how important it is to test the code in a safe environment before using it in a live training environment. Like with that text file.
Yeah.
That's how you make sure it's accurate, how you minimize risk. It's a huge lesson for anyone working with code.
Absolutely. Test your work before you let it loose on the world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And last but not least, this deep dive has shown us just how powerful VBA can be. Automating tasks, connecting systems, even building those fancy trading algorithms.
It's been really cool exploring this code, seeing how the coder thinks. And as we leave our listener to think about the possibilities, I have one last question for them. Given everything you've learned today, what kind of cool automation could you bring to your work with MS Outlook? What tasks could you streamline? What insights could you uncover? The only limits are your imagination and how willing you are to dive into the world of code. Until next time, happy coding.